He's a stone-cold liar. I respect the presidency. I've tried to have an open hand with him, tried to work with him. You can't work with Donald Trump. You can only work for him. And I will not. I refuse to work for Donald Trump.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is now calling his city's homeless encampments unacceptable, which is odd since he's the guy who, made them acceptable, turning sidewalks into red carpet events for drug addicts, thieves, and unemployed CNN.
I barely survived this whirlwind, and it had nothing to do with a brutal gym session or spicy food meltdown. This was a front-row ticket to political chaos flipping itself inside out in real time. Gavin Newsom walked in expecting another round of polished lines and flawless smiles. Then Greg Gutfeld burst into the moment like a comedic wrecking ball nobody saw coming. What followed didn't resemble a debate. It was a slow-motion collapse of confidence, composure, and public poise. And every second was impossible to look away from.
If you've been watching this show, and I know you have, you know we were the first to call out Gavin's bizarre hand movements. Remember this classic?
Conditions that determine our fate and future. And that fundamental notion of agency, I think, is important more broadly. And I think that goes to some of the issues around, victimization. And I see a lot of that, respectively, on the right, increasingly, even with Trump often approaching things from that sort of mindset.
Then even Trump couldn't help it.
Before we go any deeper, hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, this is one you do not want slipping past you. The room hadn't even settled before the tension shot upward as that practiced political grin collided with a late-night smirk sharpened to a point. You could feel the warning in the air immediately. There was zero chance this would stay polite.
I'd be lying, and I can't do that. Well, since you can't lie, what tequila were you nursing while the Pacific Palisades burned? And what was it like banging your campaign manager's wife? Of course, he's just waiting for us to forget that his state looks like an overturned porta potty. But with fake crime statistics and fake boobs, why not have a fake governor? In an interview last week, Newsom painted himself as a latchkey kid struggling to make ends meet.
It was also about paying the bills, man. And it was just like...
Newsom stepped forward with that familiar governor-level assurance, like bright lights, applause, and cameras exist for his arrival. Gutfeld's followed right behind, looking like a man freshly authorized to stir the pot with one mischievous smile.
So Newsom is fed up with tent cities, the crime, the urban decay? No, he's not mad about that stuff. He's mad you noticed. It's like a criminal telling a jury he's sorry he robbed 25 banks when he's just sorry he got caught on the 26th. Because this isn't some spontaneous crisis. It's a man-made disaster like Chernobyl or Fox and Friends. The man who made it acts like he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
It's pure government grift, shoving you down a flight of stairs and then making you pay for the handrail.
At first, everything moved with the gentle rhythm of polite small talk, and Newsom's posture radiated rehearsed authority with every breath. It was the kind of confidence formed from years of predictable press events where questions are dull props and true pushback is mostly cosmetic.
He's pretending that he's like this scrappy underdog, but he really is an elite overdog that hasn't done anything of any difference or value for California, so he has to pick fights. I mean, think about the response to the Palisades fire. Like, nothing has happened. That's on his watch. There's the exodus of people leaving California. There's the taxes, like you say, there's corruption. And I think he's trying to say, look, I can have fun and spar with...
The energy stayed neat, calm, almost too perfectly arranged, like the peaceful opening scene of a disaster film when the sky is sunny and nobody has checked the weather alerts. Then came the shift, and Gutfeld didn't force it. He let the moment rest, letting comfort sink in slowly like a well-worn routine.
His inner 10-fingered freak.
I came into that recall campaign still arguing that all politics is local. I still had a romantic notion of that. I intellectualized that a lot of our politics and the discourse was national. I didn't fully appreciate how nationalized our politics have become. In so many ways, that shape-shifted a lot of what we're doing and who I am today. But this last year, these last 6-7 months, this is something altogether different.
Ugh.
That comfort is the kind that makes you drop your guard, the kind that whispers everything is safe and familiar right before it isn't. Gutfeld kept the tone easy, the smile casual, and then lobbed the first soft job, light enough to pass as harmless, but sharp enough to test the terrain. Newsom brushed it aside with a polished deflection, the political equivalent of straightening your suit and stepping back into the spotlight. But Gutfeld never stops at one jab. He assembles an entire dartboard out of your talking points and starts scoring with your greatest hits. The second hit had real bite. Suddenly, the conversation drifted away from its scripted calm into bright, unforgiving daylight that exposes every carefully hidden corner. Newsom's expression shifted just slightly, so small most would miss it, but unmistakable to anyone who's watched a politician realize their script just caught fire backstage. Gutfeld kept peeling back layers with quiet precision, revealing contradictions, outdated lines, and promises that hadn't aged gracefully. The audience didn't erupt yet. They leaned in, the dangerous quiet when everyone senses the balance is about to snap.
Like the fires, Newsom let homelessness run wild. He allowed tens of billions of dollars to be swallowed up by a maze of consultants, nonprofits, and bureaucrats who created poop mats. It's sad. Californians used to sell maps of celebrity homes, not landmines. Now, instead of sightseeing, tourists play hopscotch so their shoes don't get hepatitis. And when residents complain, they're called cruel. And now
Newsom kept nodding, the universal move of someone pretending they still have the wheel while the car is already rolling downhill without brakes. His answers tightened, the glossy exterior thinning just enough to reveal stress lines beneath. His familiar rhythm, question, pivot, inspirational flourish, kept tripping mid-stride, like trying to dance while the floor shifts beneath you. There's always a moment in a public unraveling when the person on stage stops trying to impress the room and starts trying to survive it. That moment hit like a glass shattering in a silent room. Gutfeld wasn't flailing wildly, he was fencing with accuracy. And suddenly Newsom looked like he was swinging foam at a sharpened blade. The audience responded in waves. First, tiny bursts of laughter when something landed clean, then bigger reactions as the hits kept connecting. The room wasn't hostile, it was entertained. And that's far more punishing because being laughed at cuts deeper than being argued with. Newsom tried leaning on the weight of his resume, pressing into his record and practiced talking points, but every attempt to steady himself opened a new weak spot. Gutfeld let him talk long enough to stack a tower of confident phrases, then removed one critical piece and watched the whole thing wobble.
Except that it's about as flimsy as the drawstring on J.B. Pritzker's moo-moo. Because while Gavin was hustling, he was featured in a Children of the Rich article, detailing his ties to billionaire oil man Gordon Getty. His dad worked for the Gettys, and the same Getty fortune bankrolled Gav's first business venture, a winery. This guy owned a wine shop at 24 years old, back when yours truly was still doing nude modeling.
This was the turning point when the energy stopped feeling competitive and started feeling volatile. Newsom's tone sharpened, not in volume, but in intensity, slicing straight through the room. His pace sped up, his edges tightened, and his face carried the unmistakable look of someone realizing they stepped into a debate they assumed they had already won. His eruption wasn't a shout, it was a burst of defensive momentum, spilling out faster than he could rein it in. And Gutfeld just watched, like someone studying a fire burn itself out. No interruption, no overreaction, no rush. He let the blaze exhaust its own oxygen. When Newsom finally paused, stuck between breaths and halfway through a retort, Gutfeld slid back in as if nothing dramatic had happened. Same relaxed posture, same sly grin, now suddenly far more dangerous. The contrast said everything. One man was battling tension, the other was entertained by it. The more Newsom leaned on authority, the more the moment turned into unintentional satire. His serious lines landing as punchlines he never meant to tell. Gutfeld didn't twist anything. He didn't need to. Reality arranged correctly becomes its own exaggeration. Another redirect from Newsom, another attempt to reclaim ground, another polished defense, and another effortless checkmate from Gutfeld, made through timing instead of volume. The audience shifted from amused to delighted, reacting faster, almost predicting each hit.
Our commentary on his hands have gotten inside his head, and Gavin now is desperately trying to control himself, and or not.
Well, it's a curious question. I made the entire point that crime's an issue and we want to tackle it, and we continue to do more in that space, and we announced in...
Poor guy. I want you to watch again as his errant thumb valiantly, violently resists.
Each pause now felt like a drum roll as Newsom tried to keep control while the ground kept shifting beneath him. Every extended reply threatened to become the setup for another strike, and every earnest explanation carried the faint outline of a future punchline waiting to drop. His eruption didn't look wild. It tightened everything: his jaw, his eyes, his posture, turning his polished ease into something stiff and vulnerable. The smooth exterior that usually absorbs criticism started bouncing it inward, exposing strain he could no longer mask. Gutfeld shifted tone effortlessly, widening the frame and turning the moment into commentary on the bigger pattern, pointing out how Newsom embodied big language and sweeping promises meant to rise above the fray. Gutfeld let those lofty phrases drift upward and then simply noted how far they floated from solid ground. And that clean observation drew the night's sharpest reaction. It wasn't loud, it wasn't harsh, it was exact, the kind of truth that lands with a quiet sense of inevitability. The audience didn't burst into laughter, they eased into it, that sound of recognition when something fits too neatly to dismiss. From then on, every one of Newsom's answers carried the weight of being seen through a sharper lens, and he felt it.
So why do I keep bringing up Gavin? Well, other than my respect for his work in American Psycho, he's starting to distance himself from his party's worst ideas. Newsom, a guy who hates fossil fuels but could still bring down the price of gas by wringing out his hair, once proclaimed that his state would be a sanctuary to all who seek it. Then people actually came, tons of them, moving faster than a mob of...
Each attempt Newsom made to regain authority now landed oddly, as if the confidence behind his words had lost traction and couldn't find a stable surface again. The eruption had already crested, leaving a restless, unsettled current that clung to each gesture he made. His body language started telling the story louder than his arguments. The once relaxed governor leaned forward too often, signaling urgency, while his hands moved with a tension that revealed how boxed in he felt. His eyes followed the exchange with a focus that exposed how little room he believed he still had. This wasn't a man enjoying a debate. It was a man trying to steady a narrative that kept sliding sideways. Meanwhile, Gutfeld leaned back, not from arrogance, but ease, creating a contrast so sharp it felt cinematic. When he joked, it landed cleanly. When he commented, it locked into place with perfect timing. Even Newsom's strongest points arrived strained, as if he were pushing them uphill. While Gutfeld's replies flowed downhill with ease and speed, the eruption didn't vanish. It transformed, becoming a controlled burn, still warm, but contained. Newsom spoke more cautiously now, but caution had come too late. The earlier flare had already shaped how everything would be heard. The audience listened differently, their skepticism sharpened by the laughter that came before.
The problems of the last decade were based on his and his party's lies. A man can grow his hair out and play girls' sports. A gangbanger can claim he's oppressed. That homeless junkie, he's just an out-of-work artist. See, Newsom wasn't just ignoring the problem, he enabled it because Dems were in a woke crouch, terrified of their loony base. But now that he's seeing the White House, he's got a brand new act, a common-sense centrist, just a soccer dad in khakis, fed up with crime and chaos. It's all bull. A costume, a political drag show, and the kids that...
Gutfeld circled back, not to repeat himself, but to rearrange everything that had been said into a clearer shape, almost like sliding chess pieces into a final alignment that suddenly makes the whole board make sense. He didn't need a dramatic closing line. The exchange had already formed its own narrative, plain and unavoidable. Newsom responded with dignity, credit deserved, refusing to fall into exaggerated outrage, steadying himself and pushing forward with whatever rhythm he could still command. But that rhythm was permanently altered because the eruption earlier hadn't been the finale, it was the hinge, and every line afterward carried the aftershock of that moment. What made the whole scene hit harder wasn't just that Newsom felt pressed, it was that he knew the audience recognized it as it happened, and that awareness is the true disruptor for any politician trained to manage tension. Gutfeld widened the frame again, giving Newsom room to speak, then subtly nudging that space just enough to reshape it without force. It wasn't dominance by volume, it was dominance by tone, the quiet kind that works from underneath. By the final stretch, the eruption had cooled into something calmer but more revealing, a blend of persistence and resignation as Newsom pushed on from containment instead of command, no longer trying to seize the narrative, only to manage the tremors left behind.
Last week, Newsom said he hopes the conservative Supreme Court will overturn the current law that bans his state from removing out-of-control homeless encampments. Imagine that. Well, what did you expect, Gavin? That the sanctuary seekers were going to show up in Winnebagos? Once again, another example of a high-profile lib using his big mouth to write a check his ass can't cash. Last year, after the Texas Governor Abbott ordered that parents of transitioning children should face criminal investigation, Newsom then tweeted this: "Trans kids and their..."
The audience sensed the shift instantly, and their reactions softened into a steadier rhythm as the spectacle turned into something quieter and more reflective. The dramatic blow-up everyone expected had already happened, not in one blast, but through a sequence of precise moments that slowly tilted the ground beneath Newsom's stance. Gutfeld stayed relaxed, making his closing moves almost gentle because a knockout wasn't needed when the scorecards already leaned his way. His final remarks didn't spike, they settled, and that calmness became the clearest message of the night. Newsom closed with poise, straightening himself and trying to rebuild the posture he walked in with. But the residue lingered, the small pauses before he replied, the faint delays that felt like echoes of everything that had unfolded. It was like the aftermath of a storm everyone pretended was only mild rain, even though the air held that unmistakable clarity that follows when something strong has shifted the landscape. No debris on stage, no dramatic wreckage, just the quiet realization that the room had been rearranged in a way no one could unsee. What made the moment linger wasn't noise or chaos, it was inversion. The way timing and tone flipped titles and resumes, revealing exactly who held the room and who suddenly had to negotiate for it.
He wasn't even one of those poor kids. Hell, poor kids don't have pet otters like Gavin did. Gavin actually had a pet otter, which also means he had pet fish to feed said otter. But he's lucky he started from privilege. He never had a real job. And once he gained power, he counts on Wikipedia editors to make him working class. And then you count on nobody bothering to look it all up, which is a bad strategy in this day of Grok and ChatGPT and a public who no longer...
Gutfeld walked in as the evening's entertainment, but he left as the center of gravity, pulling the room into his orbit without ever needing to push. Somewhere between those points, the eruption stopped being about anger and became pure exposure, the kind that doesn't burn in one flash, but stays warm in the audience's mind long after the camera's cut. Everyone recognized the exact instant the balance shifted because they felt it happen in real time, right in their seats. The conversation didn't end when filming stopped. It drifted into new corners, green rooms, comment threads, and every stretch of the internet where people replayed each frame like investigators searching for micro-expressions and tiny cues. The eruption turned into a slow-burn meme cycle, spreading piece by piece. Newsom's team responded quickly, using the familiar language of steadiness and poise, the verbal equivalent of smoothing wrinkles from a suit to make everything appear untouched. Their message was clear. Nothing unusual occurred, just a spirited debate. But the more that storyline tried to settle, the more the visuals pushed back. Because the internet doesn't forget posture, timing, or the exact moment when a rhythm breaks under pressure. It remembers everything.
California law was proposed that judges in custody cases favor the parent who supports transitioning a child's new gender. Newsom killed that law quicker than a late-term abortion. Yeah, I know, huh? Now, the left, being the left, was outraged, but they missed something, because now Newsom says he only vetoed it since it's already the law. That's a nice one, dude. You got to admit, this guy's so oily, he should join OPEC. But what a magician. Only he pulls excuses out of...
Gutfeld didn't need to parade or revel once the moment passed. The silence itself made the impact sharper, because silence can roar when everyone else is scrambling to justify their version of events. His advantage lingered not because he kept mentioning it, but because he didn't. The exchange stood on its own, like a still image that replays in your mind long after the scene ends. What unsettled people most was how ordinary the moment appeared on the surface. A subtle disruption, one that shakes polished institutions more than loud chaos ever could. Storms are easy to prepare for, but you can't rehearse for a shift in gravity. Newsom's eruption, in hindsight, felt less like fury and more like a small fracture in a rhythm he'd guarded for years, a moment where his internal strain met the outside world too clearly. Once a crock shows, even if repaired, everyone knows where to look next time. Long after the laughter fades and the clips stop trending, the exchange remains a lesson in how quickly control can flip when comfort meets perfect timing. No scandal, no dramatic exit, just the unmistakable recognition of who truly owned the room and who suddenly had to fight to stay upright.